I'd like to welcome you here to our home here at 1111 East Broad Street. My name is Napoleon Bell, and I am the Executive Director with the City of Columbus Community Relations Commission. We would like to welcome you to our fourth of our series of Lunch and Learns here at 1111 East Broad Street. Our series was Building Intergenerational Communities. This one being our fourth, which is Intergenerational Living, Family Perspectives. So we've had a great, I say, season of our Lunch and Learns. It's been something that has been very informative, and we hope that it's been informative to the viewing audience and the public and those at hand. And you can also, if you missed a couple, you can go online. They are on YouTube, on our YouTube, and you can go online to check those out. You can go to the CTV website and find those also if you wish to see those, and also get a copy. You can do that through CTV. Just going over some of the ones that we did have was April 17th, we had Redefining Age and Generation. May 15th, it was we were in the workplace. And on June 19th, we did one on education. And now this final one for the series is the Intergenerational Living with the Family Perspectives. So let me just briefly tell you just a little bit about what our office does and understand why we are doing these Lunch and Learns. It's because, first of all, our office works in a couple of different areas. First of all, we enforce the Civil Rights Code for the City of Columbus in the areas of housing, employment, and public accommodations. Secondly, we house the New Americans Initiative, working with the refugee and immigrant populations here in the city, helping them navigate city services, county services, being able to help them with nonprofits, et cetera, to help them get up on their feet as quickly as possible and build capacity to integrate into our community. Thirdly, we work in the area of community police relations. That's a hot topic here in the last year or so, and we work heavily with the community and police to help build those bridges and those gaps of information and help educate them through forums such as this and others that we work with both police and the community. And then also we work in the area of community engagement and empowerment. That can looks in a couple different ways through education, through Lunch and Learns like this. We do diversity and inclusion training, and also we work in areas of the neighborhoods with neighborhood mediations and bringing people together. But all of this, we do this to build a community for all. So with that being said, if you wish to get a hold of our office for any of those reasons or others, we are sometimes the least common denominators for so many things that go on through our city. Our office number is 645-1993, and also you can go to our website at www.crc.columbus.gov. Now, as a commission, we have a commission staff, but we also have commissioners. And so we have 23 commissioners that help guide our office and also are the sounding board for many of the things that go on within the community, and we have a very diverse commission. One of those commissioners is here today, that commissioner is going to be leading this facilitation or moderation of this great panel, and she'll be introducing the panel. So without further ado, I would like to bring up our commissioner, but she's also a local attorney here in the City of Columbus. So I say commissioner/attorney, Ms. Marissa Bowers. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bell, and thank you all for being here today. As Director Bell mentioned, my name is Marissa Bowers. I am an attorney and a commissioner on the Community Relations Commission. Today, we have 5 panelists who are going to share with us their professional and personal perspectives on intergenerational families and intergenerational living. I'd also like, at this point, before we get started, to introducing the panelists, to remind folks of the resource table in the back near the door. I'd also like to extend special thanks to Molina Healthcare for providing the healthy, nutritious snacks that are in the back. And I'd also like to thank Columbus State, which has been the partner to the Community Relations Commission for this series of intergenerational experiences. So, with that, let me go ahead and start by asking the panel. I'm going to have them introduce themselves because I certainly couldn't do it justice. To introduce themselves, explain what intergenerational means to you and why today's topic is of importance to you. And we'll start on the end with Terrell Strayhorn.
Thank you. So, good morning. I'm Terrell Strayhorn, professor of higher education at The Ohio State University, where I also direct the Center for Higher Education Enterprise, affectionately known as CHI. CHI is a new research and policy center at Ohio State focused on student success. We organize our work on student success in 4 priority areas: access, affordability, engagement, and excellence. And I could say a lot more about that, but let's see, this is my 5th year on the faculty at Ohio State, which makes me also my 5th year living in Columbus. I'm a native of Virginia Beach, Virginia, and apart from the winters, love Columbus as a beautiful city in which to live. And then to your question about intergenerational, I mean, the term to me really implies or refers to communities or social spaces where individuals across generational lines cohabitat, commingle, interact. It may also, for the purpose of this conversation, mean individuals living in the single dwelling space. But I also think about intergenerational communities, neighborhoods. I'd hope that we could build an intergenerational country where just a few months ago, or maybe weeks ago, time flies when you're having fun. I spoke to some supervisors in Franklin County about what it's like to work with millennials in the workplace. To me, the workplace is intergenerational in that we have crossing generations and people showing up on teams and units and supervising people who are from a newer generation. We had to figure out how to work across what are those dominant interests, what are the challenges and tensions, as well as strategies for working effectively across them. So I'm looking forward to all that we have on this panel. Turn it to my good friend, Gwen.
Yeah, it's an honor to be here with you again. Hi, my name is Gwen Stetler. It is a joy to be here today and see a number of familiar faces, including Napoleon and Gail. Had the great joy of serving with them in a variety of ways. And Napoleon, we got to do the ABCs of policing together with the Somali community, and Gail and I did a presentation on building community for all with United Way. I have about 25 years experience locally here in Central Ohio, working in the areas of, I would say, human and community development. And that's, I've worked primarily around a variety of issues around homelessness and housing, restoring citizens. For me, spirituality is very integral to this. I'm a graduate of the Methodist Theological School and have been, through experiences, have become very deeply involved in interfaith community building. My family, and I include a deep love of my bio family. My husband and I, I think as we talk about today, I want to talk about how we also reframe family to be bio plus. That when I think of intergenerational family, I think of a metaphor. You had a great definition, but I also really truly think of a spiritual metaphor of the welcome table. Our family, I'm taking some intentional time this summer. Our family lives in a home with Underground Railroad history, and there's going to be a historical marker. It was approved by the state that will be put in on Labor Day. And we've started an LLC as we define our family as our, my husband and I are partners in this LLC endeavor, Shared Space Lucy Depp Park LLC, but it also includes in that definition of family the community, the beloved community. And so we share a barn that we're restoring. In fact, the Columbus Mentoring Center's got a group of youth from the AME Church that'll be coming and doing experiential learning about history with intergenerational mentors on Tuesday evening. And I'll share more, but it's a joy to be here.
Thank you. And my name is Danius Williams. So glad to be here with you guys today. I actually had the pleasure of being an intern, one of the first at the Community Relations Commission, and so very excited to be back. I am originally a native from Venezuela. I'm from South America, so first-generation immigrant, and came here with my parents when I was young. And I think within the topic, just thinking about what that means within a culture setting, ethnic background, as well as the faith background, it's very interesting to see all of this play out, as well as in the workspace. As you were saying, I've had the great privilege after being with the Community Relations Commission to be in a lot of work settings where I came in and had the opportunity to lead others in a managerial environment where a lot of the times, a lot of the people that I was leading are much older than myself. And so for me, it's, I think it'll be very cool to actually share what that means and how you can do that within these different settings, faith-based, your workspace, as well as a family-based. Thanks, Daniel.
Hi, I'm Jill Gores. Happy to be here. I work at the Center for Family Safety and Healing. It's part of Nationwide Children's Hospital, and I'm a care coordinator with the Fostering Connections program, which is essentially a foster care clinic. We provide a medical home for kids in Franklin County foster care and kinship care. So this topic means a lot to me because we see a lot of grandparents taking care of their kids, and then on kind of the other end of the spectrum, we work with kids who have aged out of foster care. They've turned 18, and we can keep them in our clinic until their 22nd birthday. So we try to offer support during those years, and we see a lot of returning to family structures, and so there's a lot of intergenerational dwelling that happens with these kids, and so we've got to see firsthand through these families some of the challenges and benefits that they have when they do that. So these are the kids we work with the most, and so that makes it pretty important to us.
Thank you. Mr. Warsama?
My name is Mahdi Warsame. I work for the Somali Outreach Program at the Buckeye Ranch. We provide mental health and behavioral health services for the youth, the ages of 5 to 18. My program involves, the Somali program involves dealing with the Somali youth, and it's really an issue that I have to deal with every day, the issue of the intergenerational differences. Keep in mind that intergenerational for the immigrant community doesn't mean age. When we are talking about the American-born community, we are talking about age. But when we are talking about the immigrant community, we are talking about the cultural differences depending on when they came to the United States. We have at least 3 different generations. The first generation are the ones who came as an adult, 20 years and older. The second generation are the ones who came as a youth, maybe between 10 and 19 years old. And the third generation are the ones who were born here in the United States, or at least they came when they were too young, and the only culture they know is the American culture. And that creates a lot of adjustment issues, a lot of cultural clashes and cultural differences. And that's what I would like to focus on my discussion. Thank you.
I think that's an excellent point, and I think many of us may not have considered that intergenerational can have different meanings. If I could go maybe a little bit out of order with our questions and focus a little bit more on that issue of culture to start with. Mr. Warsama, do you have anything else you'd like to add regarding how what role culture plays in an intergenerational family and how that can be handled better or for worse within a family structure?
Very much, yes. So let's go back to the place called Horn of Africa that most of the Somalis came from. They are Muslims and they are Africans at the same time. And in Somali and African culture and Islamic culture, family unity and family support system and maintaining good relationship with your relatives is very important. So that creates a culture of, basically culture of the families depending on each other and living together. In fact, we have kind of segregation based on clan and families in Somalia. People do not live together based on where they work and who their friends are and where they have interest in. people live based on where their clan or sub-clan is. So you have whole regions, whole sections of Somalia, for example, and other Horn of African countries, where the only people you know are your distant relatives and your members of your sub-clan. Even if they don't live in the same house, they will live in the same locality. The only time, the exception is that if somehow they work for the government, they have to move somewhere else, or they travel out of the country. But if every region is segregated based on ethnicity, based on clan and sub-clans. So that was the culture. Families always live together, and siblings and children do not move out of the house of their parents until they get married. And even after they get married, they live next door in the same locality. Here it's completely different. Where you live depends on your interests, where you go to school, where you find job, and so on and so forth. So when they come here, it puts, especially the younger generation, it puts a lot of pressure on them, because on one hand, they want to maintain that culture and have that family support system and support their parents and stay with them. But at the same time, they have to live their lives, and they want to have privacy, and they might find jobs somewhere in another state. So that makes a big difference, and you find people torn between these two cultures. Thank you.
Maybe a follow-up question, and I want to make sure to ask Danius as well, with her background as a Venezuelan immigrant. My family is Lebanese, but it's the last century was when there was a large Lebanese immigration here. And I have found that it seems that maybe diffuses over time, that there's less centralization of a community. Do you think that, maybe this is a follow-up question, and I'd like Danius to maybe give us her thoughts too. Do you think that we'll see that happen with other communities over time, such as the Somali community, or do you think that it will stay as concentrated? Do you have a thought on that? Yeah.
I mean, as far as for the Hispanic community, I think what really is to play is just even the difference between generation to generation within an age, and that cultural background. And when you talk about it within a faith standpoint too, just as a culture as a whole, our society is changing. That really causes a lot of conflict, and I think it goes beyond just that culture, unity, trying to keep those customs and all of those things. I know for us personally, we are a very tight-knit family. So for example, the intergenerational living is definitely something we talk about. Right now, my siblings and I, we all live in separate homes, but we talk about it all the time, that at some point, once our parents get older, we would definitely maybe buy a large home and we would all come together. I think that is a lot of our cultural background. And then also when you look at it from a faith-based standpoint, Christianity was really built up on the concept of the community staying together and different family members living together. I think within even just the 21st century, the church as a whole is trying to stay more modernized, and so it's very important that that intergenerational conversation and collaboration is happening. But as a whole, as you look at it culturally, yes, I think as we get older and as things continue to shift within society, culturally we're letting go a lot of those customs, just because I just naturally you're gravitating towards change.
Gwen, would you like to address maybe the religious perspective, since that's being sort of
I
integrated?
was just thinking today, actually, I believe is a very special intergenerational holiday for some too. I believe that some are celebrating Eid today, and with generations coming together. So I want to remember that as we talk. One thing that came to my mind is cultures. I actually was raised in a rural culture, but have worked and lived across cultures throughout time. But We just recently had a group of Amish working on the restoration of our barn, and what I wanted to speak to for a moment is how intergenerationally different cultures learn trades. One of the Amish leads, he was 24, he talked about how he was mentored by his dad and brothers from 16 to 20 to learn his trade. And I know the Amish aren't the only people. There's folks from across different cultures and traditions that they learn a trade that way. It's not an academic discourse. And so we have this blending going on of how cultures learn things, how wisdom is sought, and I just think it's important to keep that in mind, that how we learn and kind of what weighs heavy, what is weighted in terms of learning and authority is different in cultures too.
So something that you asked about the role of culture in intergenerational families, and Mr. Warsama was talking, it made me think about so much of what we often think about cultural processes, we assume that they just happen naturally, and that all we have to do is bring people together, or people simply being together will magically make the things that we know we want occur. And so what I'd like to offer for the conversation is keep our mind on the fact that what we're really talking about is cultural exchange, and that exchange does not necessarily happen automatically, and it's not the only exchange that's taking place. So last night I went to Walmart. That's inconsequential to my comments, except that I went to Walmart near Easton after going over there, and I remember I was struck by the number of women in Walmart who were dressed in cultural attire. They were wrapped, but not even thinking about this conversation, you know, older women in Walmart last night were wrapped in cultural attire that was Black. And then there were younger women, I'd say they were probably in like high school, maybe about to go to college, whose wrap was in color. And the young women were in the section of the store that's music and CDs. And I heard laughter, but the laughter was so young, I didn't think that these women could pull that laughter off. And so I look back, and there flies a little girl who's with them who does not have a wrap at all. She has on just jeans and a t-shirt or something. She's with them. And I thought about it while you were talking, that if we're not careful, we'll assume that just by putting people together, cultural exchange and cultural preservation will happen. And it won't, especially not in this country where, I mean, most cultural processes push us away from our cultural origins. Schools do it. So as a professor, I'm part of a system that's designed to move us away from the Black wrap to the young girl who's in jeans and a t-shirt, right? So we should keep our eye on how do we get intergenerationals, whether it's first generational to this country, or if it's generation of US-born folks who are older and younger, bring them together. But I sort of close where Gwen began, and that is I was born in a family with my mom and dad, but there were periods of time where my grandmother stayed with us. And what was most profound about my grandmother staying with us is not just her mere presence. It was the stories that she told me about what it was like for her growing up in North Carolina. The stories about a grandmother, a great-grandmother and a great-grandfather that I didn't know because they had died before I was born, but I heard stories about them. It was the fact that my grandmother would tell us, you know, in this family, blood is thicker than water. This is culture. What is culture? Culture is a system of beliefs and practices that mark it off from others. So that's what we're trying to wrap our minds and our arms around and hold on to. And I think is what Mr. Warsama was talking about. We need to, one, understand that that's the goal, preserve it, but not think that it happens automatically. It takes some tending and some working and some stoking of the exchange. You know, you have to get people to sit down and talk about what do we believe, and what are our values, and how are they different from other people's, and how are they different from the norm in this country, and then what can we do to protect them? Yeah.
Great comments. Go ahead.
Also, we mentioned values. It makes me think that this is sort of this can be a negative thing, but for those of us that work with families, intergenerational families, one thing that for families who've been in poverty generation after generation after generation, there's a certain value that's loyalty that conflicts with the value of trying to succeed or to break the patterns. And so something that we try to keep in mind as we work with families is that there are times where folks who are trying to break patterns of poverty or trying to break out and find gainful employment or be able to be more independent or even just more financially stable, sometimes that is perceived by other family members as being a threat and as a break in loyalty. And so when it comes to values and culture, when you think about folks in poverty, that's one of the things that we try to keep in mind because it creates an extra dynamic to work on. So, yeah.
So maybe with that in mind, I think a next question that might flow from that is how do we prepare generations to live together? What kind of things can families think about or individuals think about when they're beginning to integrate into an intergenerational home? Sure, go ahead, Jill.
For our families, we think a lot about technical things, legal issues, consent issues because of medical care that's involved and insurance and things like that. You want to have ducks in a row so you know who can take whom to the doctor and who can make decisions about medical care, both for the elderly and for children. We want to think about space issues and make sure that the dwelling place can accommodate, that's actually a pretty big deal, can accommodate both needs of, again, elderly people who may have equipment issues or maybe it's baby proof, and because there's a little one coming in and you need to make sure that there's baby gates and plug-in protectors. And then the other thing that I think maybe is one of the most important things is to clarify roles and expectations. I mean, with culture and religion and all of those factors playing, I think that often roles and expectation is something that's under-communicated about, and that these families will live together and attempt to work together without really having a clear view of who gets to parent the kids. Is the head of the household, do they trump everything, or do the parents still have that authority even though they maybe aren't the head of the household in that situation? So just kind of clarifying those sorts of expectations, financial contribution, is it just I'm going to help out whenever I can, or I'm going to contribute a specific amount or cover a certain bill? But having those conversations as early in the process as possible is pretty important.
How do those conversations, how are they the same between sort of already already present families versus families that are coming from abroad?
I think that's a really important point to bring up because I think it really does matter when that transition happens. Like for us, for example, we have a lot of family that comes from Venezuela or just the Hispanic community in general. A lot of people come here for the idea of a better day, a better world. And so when you have those family members come in, that family member that is already established here, it's a very different open perspective where you're wanting to welcome them. It's more of a partnership. And I think culturally too, it depends what culture you're kind of talking about because there's different customs and traditions that others have. I know with the Hispanic community, we take great pride in taking care of our parents. And so, for example, like if we travel with my parents, we pay for everything. Or when they get older, we will take care of them. That's our responsibility. So I think that plays a very large role as well. Like I talked about, is what timing are we talking about? And what are they coming here for? So that I think that matters as well.
An interdisciplinary perspective. Working with intergenerational families, maybe dealing with recovery, some issues that from some work in foster care. I think the idea of having some rigorous honesty is important too within family systems. That is much beauty and wonderful, and we'll talk later about the economics and the good that comes from generations being together. There are also times and important, rigorously honest conversations that need to happen around things that we need to shed too, things that maybe over time have not worked, and that we can be in denial in a way about them not working, but the cycles can repeat. So I think whether it's in a more honest family type conversation or whether it's in training, that all the goodness is not outweighed by these challenges. In fact, there's recent studies out about in kinship care. We know it's one of the great, wonderful ways for kids who are in foster placement to live in that kind of housing. But in kinship care, some of the data is really horrible about repeated cycles of things that happen and the amount of kids that kind of, they say, blow out of that housing because of the repeated cycles happening.
So not just an initial outset with no readdressing it down the road, you have to sort of revisit the expectations or issues over time. Anything else regarding that topic?
I want to say something about the influence of the religion when it comes to the intergenerational families living together. As noted before, in the religion of Islam, one of the main tenets of the religion is that you take care of your parents and you are dutiful to them. And that itself made the Muslim communities in the East and in Africa and Middle East to basically, once the parents reach to a point where they cannot take care of themselves, somebody takes over the responsibility, either a child, and if there's no child, the closest or nearest relative. So what we know in the United States as nursing homes, assisted living facilities, don't really exist in Africa and in the Middle East, because even non-Muslim Africa is the same culture. Even India is the same culture. Parents always have support, whether they even if they are not incapacitated or they are not too old. Children do everything. They do the shopping, they pay the bills, they take care of everything. So when the elderly immigrants from that part of the world come to the United States, they continue that culture, and you will hardly see any child sending their parents to anywhere other than to live with them. So that's very important. And generally speaking, just the living together itself is a big support system for the immigrant communities from that part of the world. It's itself is economical, it's cultural, it's religion. They stick together. People ask me why we have a large Somali community in Columbus. And the short answer is it's because of other Somalis. There's no other explanation. If they tell you I moved to Columbus because of this and that, that's not true. The only reason they came here is they want to find each other and live in the same locality. So this is something that's very important in this culture.
Other strengths, both long-term and short-term, of growing up in an intergenerational family. I think Dr. Warsama touched on several assets of living and growing up in an intergenerational family. Anything else that comes to mind among the panelists?
I'm not a doctor, by the way.
Oh, sorry, excuse me, Mr. Warsama. Excuse me.
You want to talk the economic strengths with this?
Sure,
Is that what
absolutely. I
blended
think
with it?
economic
So
strengths kind of tie into that.
having worked some years in affordable housing and the sheltering system, certainly when resources can be shared. I mean, when you see families that are able to thrive, they've been able to find ways very practically and pragmatically to share resources. And I know in housing that can mean a variety of things, but when people seek housing together, later on we can talk about the challenges. I mean, size with some of the units is a big one, but very practically, one of the most significant strengths very much is just the sharing of resources that can be done when human beings come together across the generations in a unit like that.
And specifically, I mean, I'm a family law practitioner, and I see the cost of daycare and childcare as very prohibitive for a lot of families. I would think that having a grandparent or a young adult, either cousin or aunt or something like that in the home, certainly helps with childcare and relieves that stress and burden of childcare.
That's a big one.
Can either or any of you speak to the issue? I think the issue of substance abuse and addiction was.
What was it exact? What was the question? Issue of?
I think that Gwen brought up substance abuse a little bit earlier and the impact of addiction within the home. And I was wondering if there were any studies or resources that you could point to or knowledge from your work experience as to whether an intergenerational household can help support or hinder recovery.
I think you'll find studies that support both, that there's the challenges without being addressed and appropriate, for a long time the focus was on the intervention language, but also about how systems, the repeated cycles happen. Without that being addressed, the opportunities for folks to succeed are challenging. I think there are great models within permanent supportive housing around how family units with support as they get into housing, that's the key. The support that's the great match, the great fit for that family will make all the difference.
Okay, thank you. Anything else with regard to costs? Or, go ahead.
I see a lot of the benefits with having shared resources and a little more money and resources going into the pool. Something though on the flip side that we see is we'll have grandparents who are still working, they're still in the workforce, and then they are unexpectedly asked to take care of grandkids because of a foster care situation, and they can be an alternative to foster care, which is usually highly preferred. The problem is that they don't receive the same sort of financial support from the county that foster parents receive, and so it can be very, very stressful for some grandparents who have small grandchildren and they're still in the workforce, and now they're expected to be able to fund daycare for these kids and all of the other general expenses that go along with raising children. And so on that side, it can be a very stressful thing because they have a strong sense that they want to take care of family, but it's really difficult. Right now, there's not a ton of resources in place. There's some, but not a ton to help with that burden.
One follow-up. The first exposure I had to this intergenerational model being a focus, when I worked at the YWCA directing the Interfaith Hospitality Network, right down the street here, there was intergenerational daycare that had adults from Heritage Adult Daycare and kids from experiencing homelessness out of homeless families together there. And it was absolutely magical, the way the older adults and the kids and that sharing of resources came together. There's a lot of cost effectiveness in the long haul. The sustainability became an issue about how to fund something like that. But so it's both a tremendous asset and then to look at sustainable models is interesting.
Mr. Warsama, yes.
The issue of, I want to comment about the issue of substance abuse. There is something called CAT or chat. I think the most common spelling is KHAT. To some extent, it's a problem in the Somali community. Some older generation Somali men, they do the qat. And I would say that affects the children because qat creates a lot of social problems for the community, divorce, family conflict, wasting economic resources, maybe even legal problems. So that affects the children, and maybe some children who otherwise would never have seen qat in their life may be exposed to this because their parents happen to be Somalis. So that's the only thing I can think of. Because if your parents are Somali and your father is doing it, then the likelihood of you doing it, even if you were born in the United States, is very high. So that's a concern. Most Somalis mostly do not use any other form of drug. Maybe the younger generation who were born here in the United States might test marijuana and those other things. But the older generation, the only drug they know is qat, and it's only men who are doing it, and it's not widespread. It's just some men, and that they expose that to their children, and that has an effect on the families. Thank you.
Any follow-ups?
So building on the benefits, beyond the economic benefits of intergenerational families, and we've touched on a couple of points around sort of cultural exchange and cultural uplift, but I would also think about it, as a person in education, there's a lot of potential for benefits there when there's intergenerational families. So the way I see it happening is in two ways. One, through identity. And Mr. Warsama mentioned this, that if families are living together intergenerationally from a cultural perspective or from an age perspective, they're likely picking up messages about who they are and the groups they're connected to. Those stories that I mentioned about my grandmother, as well as the cultural values, things that you're committed to, deeply committed to, as well as those things that values that are incongruent with how we operate as a country, or incongruent with living in democracy, right? So that's what the kid, the young person, the school-age person's picking up. And it's probably leading to a more solid and resolved core identity. And students who are who know who they are and who report on surveys having a more affirmed and stable identity perform better in schools. Largely because schools are taught in ways that people who know who they are and are competent and comfortable being competent and aren't distracted trying to figure out identity issues. And identity issues are things like, do I belong? Do I fit in? Which it connected with what Mr. Warsama was saying about Somali people who move here because they want to belong and fit in. If students then feel like they belong and they find that sense of community, it probably makes it very more possible for them to excel in schools, which is another non-economic but an important benefit. And then the other part is through, so I said first was through the sort of cultural exchange, preservation, probably through belonging, but the other is through mindsets. Mm-hmm. And, people perform better when they have multiple mindsets that they can deploy when they're confronted with problems. In other words, it's not just diversity of people and race, gender, but also diversity of perspectives. And living intergenerationally exposes people to different mindsets, how people think about the world. I remember something about my own grandmother. It always struck me. My grandmother would say things like, well, when you get to where you're going, I travel a lot. She said, when you get to where you're going, call me. And my grandmother passed 2 years ago, but I would often think, in my mind, not out loud, but I would think, can I just text you? And I would tell her this sometimes, I'd text her and she'd say, well, you didn't call me. And I say, but I text you. And my grandmother, text is never going to be equal to a phone call. Yeah. Now, what I have to say is text and phone call in a lot of settings is equal for me. Mm-hmm. But that's okay for my generation. But by living with my grandmother, by engaging my grandmother and my grandmother's friends and networks, I'm exposed to a different mindset so that I'm more ready for working in the workplace or living in a community where there can be different values about how we communicate. Some people prefer phones, some people prefer text, some people want to say hi in the morning when you walk out to your car, some people don't. I think those are broader benefits that people get that not only serve the family but serve society.
I love what you said because it really sparked for me. I'm with Cypress Church, and we're a large church over on the west side and have a few campuses. And I know for us, as we plan for our ministry, a lot of what we do is really shaped around the strength of our ministry is really shaped around how are we making decisions based on the different mindsets of those vast amounts of generations that we are trying to serve. And really, it's all in what you said, that the way you reach people for Christ is how you are really compelling them through what's going to touch their hearts. And so for us, we have to make decisions based on someone who is a small child till all the way of a very much mature senior citizen, in trying to be very compelling in that message. So I think within all of the conversations we're having, again, generational interaction is all based upon the story of what you shared, is a grandmother, even if you text her, it's not going to mean much to her because it's the phone call or that written letter. So in every decision we make as a ministry, it's how is this going to impact someone who is a young adult to someone who is 99.
Go ahead.
Just had an experience that relates to this. I did an interfaith wedding, officiated it, and there was a local woman from a large United Methodist church locally who her spouse, her fiance, flew in her grandmother, who then came to live here, was from India, and flew 17 hours to be with us. And what I learned from this experience in doing the wedding, we had incorporated traditions. It was a multicultural wedding, but I offered at one point that during the wedding, if there was something that wanted to be shared or sung, that the family could be welcome to do that. At the central point of the wedding, she came up and she started singing a blessing to them, and we could have missed it. But she felt welcome and an invitation, that hospitality to participate, and it was a real reminder to me that sense of hospitality and welcome, a flexibleness in the mindset that we could have missed out on that.
So it sounds like we've sort of touched on some of the challenges of integrating an intergenerational family. Could you maybe address what you perceive as the biggest challenge you find in intergenerational living? Or one of the biggest, I suppose.
I think, Ron, you brought up a good point, is just as we work with one another, not, live with one another, work with one another, it's trying to understand where that mindset is coming from and trying to relate with it can be very different. I know for me, growing up as an immigrant here, for example, we weren't allowed to watch television or stay the night out at someone's home because that wasn't part of our custom. So for eventually, some of that changed and became a little more flexible, but you see that in so many different settings. And so for us, it was very difficult to understand where our parents were coming from because all we knew was the society we were surrounded by, that school environment. So it's just, I think, trying to gauge that and then trying to understand it to make those decisions.
Mr. Warsama, I think you had said you wanted to speak on this.
I would say that the biggest challenge for the immigrant community in particular is the cultural differences of the generations. Most of the younger generation, especially the ones who were born here or came here in a young age, they would like to have a privacy. They would like to live their own life in a separate place. They don't want to be under the direct supervision or watch of their parents. So they may want to take care of their parents. They might want to keep that part of the culture where they're supposed to take care of their families. But at the same time, it's not, they don't want to live under the same roof. And that is a challenge because there's a different expectations between the generations. As far as the older immigrant generation is concerned, the first generation, their children have to be whatever nationality they are. If they are Somali, they have to be Somalis and live as Somalis. If they don't recognize this system of families living apart in different states. So that's one, the cultural differences is a big part. And also I would say a personal interest because what about if the children get a job in another state or the parents want to go back to their native country, or what about if the parents want to live in a certain localities and the children prefer another state? Those are some of the challenges I think that it's particularly among the immigrant community.
What about a changing of roles? For example, aging parents who are no longer caretakers and it becomes the children who are the caretakers. What kind of maybe advice or thoughts would you have about a scenario like that?
I think there, again, are time frames where there's somebody here who works on the healthcare issues to help people to be able to stay in housing longer. I've got neighbors at Lucy Depp Park that are looking at how they add a bedroom, a bathroom, a wing into their house, to adapt the housing so it's fully intergenerational so parents can live there. And there are other stories like that, maybe it's another room, maybe it's another way of living, but adapting so that the elders can feel honored and included and cared for and participate, maybe and have ways to feel that their work is equal and valid, maybe in the care with the children, just the varied roles that can happen when that welcome's there. But it does take a different kind of look at how we live and dwell together. And on the one other point with that, this leads to a challenge. I have seen people in affordable housing with the policies that are there, sometimes with the numbers of people actually lose their housing, which is such a precious, precious resource because they so want to be together, but their numbers, it's against the rules, how many people are together. And people will even hide their pregnancies because, with the kind of clothing being worn, the property manager might not even be able to tell that a person's been pregnant, and then we would find out that there may be a couple people over the number of people that can be in that unit, and you just can't find another housing unit or rooms in that size as a match. So those are some challenges that go along with the strength.
Jill?
And speaking about roles, I think I have an example of a family that I work with now. The young lady she's 17 now. She had a baby at 16. She lives with her mom. And there has been, so my main obstacle that I think of is conflict, and a lot of that conflict stems from these roles that aren't very clear. And so the teenager's mom feels that she is responsible for parenting her daughter as well as her grandson. The young mother feels responsible for parenting her own son. And so there's plenty of conflict, which leads into their styles being different of parenting. There's these, which is maybe a tie for one of the obstacles, and that there's these dysfunctional patterns that are sometimes, someone mentioned, passed down through generations. And when that's a problem is when that behavior becomes normalized because you haven't been able to see other ways of dealing with conflict or other ways of that might be options for you to live. So substance use sometimes is very much a normalized thing. Things that, there's a variety of things that are holding the family back, but they seem very normal to the family. And so those two things, I think, are the two biggest obstacles.
Any other comments on challenges, obstacles?
I want to echo about the housing issue. I should have mentioned this. In fact, I would say that there are some families who cannot even find a housing, appropriate and proper housing, because they have large families. We deal with this at the Buckeye Ranch every day. Families that were evicted, families that could not get a place to live because they cannot buy a house, at least now, and B, there are very few 4-bedrooms here in Columbus, and if they are already occupied. So especially those needy families, immigrant needy families, they really struggle with this because they have, especially if they have more than 6 kids. If they have 6 or less, it's easy to find. 3-bedroom is fine. But if it's more than that, it's really struggle.
Yeah.
One other challenge, intergenerational responses to trauma within families it's a very interesting topic when you get into trauma-informed care. I know one of the apartment communities where I spent a lot of time serving, there were a number of folks that lived 7 to 8 years in camps, like in Kenya. And the adolescent's response, one adolescent described to me, he came from Kenya and the next week he was in school at Central Crossing. And he had some special supports within that school to deal with the trauma of the adjustment. His dad, on the other hand, had been used to walking up to 20 plus miles a day. So, the things, the physical changes, and our responses to these different, there are trauma centers in different parts of the world. The Middle East would be one of them that have some years of working with these issues and how the generations respond to it. So we're still kind of newbies about how intergenerational, trauma-informed care within families gets lived out and how it impacts a common dwelling and our way of being together.
I mean, so much of what we're talking about, and I agree with all of it, these are, each of these represent challenges that are part of this, this goal of having families live intergenerationally. But all of these individual challenges are actually the consequence of a structural problem. And that is that the idea of building intergenerational families or intergenerational communities is actually flies in the face of the dominant mindset of this country. We're not a country that thinks about having our elderly live with us. I mean, that's not how we raise kids. Individually, we might, but as a country, it's not the stories that are in elementary schools. The stories in elementary schools are about people get old and they go away, and young people start to pick up messages about, oh, that's what you do with old people when that happens. And the pictures of a family usually are mom, dad. Nowadays, it could be two partners, but it might, and then one or two kids, but you don't see an extended family in the characterization of most families in this country. And I think we should also keep our eye on what's the dominant structure that shapes, because that's what creates the foster care policy that says we'll give money to foster care parents, but not to grandparents that are willing to take care of kids. That's the dominant mindset that shapes the housing policies and practices that cut down the number of 4-bedroom homes. Is because most people don't need 4-bedroom homes because the dominant culture doesn't. But we should interrupt, we should resist, we should probably even dismantle that mindset so that we could think more intergenerationally as a country.
And it's interesting because intergenerational living is not a new concept. I mean, I think about the role my Lebanese grandmother had in my upbringing and my Chinese sister-in-law's relationship with her family, and they're centuries old, and what we've been hearing from South American cultures and African cultures. So I would really, it's not a new idea, it's just something maybe different than what the dominant paradigm has been here. So I think that's an excellent point. I think Gwen had another comment to that.
Well, you think of so many missions. There's a lot of discourse, whether it be in social work and other areas around self-sufficiency. There's a time and a place for that, but then we don't always teach the communal living part. So we teach people about self-sufficiency, but not how to live in community. So that has a big impact on intergenerational living.
I found it very interesting not too long ago. My mom, we're Hispanic, and she said to me, I think it's very interesting that when most young people or when most people your age talk about family, you mean just your husband and your children. When I think of family, I think of all of us. And she was almost saying she was a little hurt that I don't include her when when I'm talking to a new friend and they're asking you who's your family. She said, why don't you include me? And I thought that was so interesting that she would find that very hurtful because that's what she knows. And again, there's that difference between that generation. So that's a very good point.
So what are some potential remedies or asks, specifically maybe around the housing issue? I know this is a big problem in Columbus right now. Or maybe we've addressed potentially changing or addressing some foster care rules that might enable grandparents to be better caretakers. What other ideas does the panel have maybe around some remedies or fixes?
Our mindset impacting policy. So our mindset about who and what a family is, who is our brother, who is our sister, and how we're in relationship with each other really does impact policy. It also impacts training, whether it be with social workers and others about who weights or who counts as family, and how we literally allow people to live and dwell together, or how we encourage people to see a resource in their life, how we define who and what counts as family, again, as our brother and sister. It really, there's some wonderful resources around this whole idea of no more throwaway people. So in the time share, time banking kind of mindset, that if all people matter, and we're each in many ways brothers and sisters, it really does begin to change how we look at policy on this.
Because it's driven by, business interests. Real estate is a big business in the United States, and they are in the business of maximizing the unit. It's not how big that unit is. It's more houses you build, more money you make. So something have to give, like our planners, city planners, real estate developers. They have to realize that there's a market for large families, period. If I don't know any apartment in Columbus that has 5 bedrooms, there are very few of them. But there's a market for it. What's wrong with having 6-bedroom apartments, 7-bedroom apartments, or maybe even 10-bedroom apartments? What's wrong with that? If we are thinking about business and all we care is of making money out of this, that's a business. You make money out of this. And each city and each community is different. There maybe there's no need for 7-bedroom apartments in Montana or somewhere in Iowa. But if there's a need in Columbus, why don't build it? Remember the old statement, built and they will come? They will come. And they are already here. So let's think about the different families that we have, the different cultures that we have, the immigrant community, and let's accommodate them. Thank you.
Other comments? What does an intergenerational family look like? What might be some characteristics? I kind of want to get away from what's written as question 10 because I just read something recently that we shouldn't reinforce myths by stating myths. So therefore, we should talk about the truth of what intergenerational families look like. I think Jill maybe had some thoughts on that.
So one of the, I think it's very hard to define, and that's one of the things that the misconception would be that it is all one thing. Some families that are intergenerational are poor, and some of them are pretty well off, and some of them are together because of necessity, and some of them are together because it's what they want to do. And so it's hard. I think that the thing to keep in mind is that you just can't quite pin it down. I have kids that have aged out of foster care and have been waiting and waiting to have that freedom so they can return to their family of origin and live with their parents and grandparents. And again, I've mentioned several times we have grandparents that are taking care of their grandkids, and then there are also grandkids or grandparents who are involved in taking care of their grandkids and their own children live with them as part of a safety plan or as part of an extra support network. So really, from my perspective, it's very difficult to be able to put what this looks like in a box. It looks like generations interacting with one another. So nice and broad.
Any other thoughts or comments about characteristics of an intergenerational family, or did Jill kind of sum it up for us?
I think, I want to say something, but my head is spinning because I just thought about when Jill was speaking. So at my center, we have a study looking at foster care youth and trying their pathways into higher education. One, what are their challenges? And of course, there are lots of policy challenges for them, as well as what are our strategies for ensuring their success in college. And the way we've conducted the study, it's largely interviews with foster youth about their aspirations for college, as well as those who are in higher education, talking about how'd you get here and what were your experiences. And some of those interviews have been the most profound for me. I mean, I remember one in particular where, and my family adopts a lot. I didn't know this until one of my friends pointed out that we adopt a lot. I have aunts and uncles and cousins, just my sisters. I mean, there's so many adopted folks in my family, but when we operate as a family. You don't sort of say, well, all the adopted folks go over here and all the people who were born in the family go over here. You wouldn't even know until you sat down and talked to us long enough. But that being said, I never thought about my experience within foster care, or like in what way did foster care touch my life until this young man was talking in his interview. And he said, so I'm in college because of my mom. And I said, Okay, and in my mind, because of how I live in this country, and my mom is the person who bore me biologically, that's what I had in mind. And then he said, yeah, and I met her, and I thought, So I asked, tell me about your mom, and learned that his mom that he was talking about was his adopted mom, who was different from his foster moms and different from his biological mom. But this panel is about intergenerational families. And what his interview has left me just spiraling all the time with is, what's a family? And who's a family? And who counts? And who's a part? And who's, so I think Jill did sum it up. It's people together across generations interacting purposefully. But who those people are, it could be all over the map, so to speak.
Hearing you talk, it reminds me, I want to talk a minute about mentors as family members. So at Lucy Dett Park, we have this Underground Railroad history, and we're partnering with the Columbus Mentoring Center, who have youth being recruited from St. John African Methodist Episcopal Church and other AME congregations in Central Ohio who want to integrate experientially in partnership with mentors, learning about Underground Railroad history, their history, this family of freed persons that came and were farmers and were some of the first black landowners in the United States by doing an experiential garden, by learning about farming and coming together regularly as a family in that way. These kids from single-parent homes, and it's creating a new sense of family with them.
Before I open this up to the audience for questions, it sounds like Terrell and Gwen have kind of already sort of given some sort of closing thoughts, perhaps. I'd like to invite the rest of the panel and Gwen and Terrell, if you have any additional thoughts, to kind of sum up and maybe what you might like to share with the audience before we turn it over for questions.
I think that's the beauty as we're talking about intergenerational, just living interaction, is that you have the opportunity, just as human beings, to interact with people from all vast of backgrounds. Be a mentor program, be a family member, be whatever it might be. I think what you take away from it is the way someone touches your heart, they become part of your family. They leave a footprint. It's a faith family. It's, those people you do life with. That's what this all becomes. So it doesn't matter who you're interacting with, it's the footprint they're leaving on your heart. Yeah.
The first time I seen anybody discussing this topic of intergenerational living was when I watched a program called 2020 by ABC a long time ago. It was sometime in 1990s. I don't remember what year it was. And the topic of the night was the title, Barbara Walters. She said the topic was 25 and still living with mom. And you can Google it. Maybe it's still there somewhere. We can find the video. And she was interviewing some men around the country, and older men, 25 or older, are still living with their moms. And she was talking about this in the context of as if there's something wrong with this, or as if this is unexpected. And I was new to the United States at the time, and I was looking, what's wrong with living with your mom? Don't you have to live with your mom and take care of her when she can't do it for herself anymore? So that was a surprise to me. I want to share that with you. And secondly, in Somali culture, living together, period, is a big deal. It's a big economical and cultural thing. For example, what unmarried young Somali men and women, this is what they do. One of them will lease an apartment in his or her name, maybe 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3, whatever, and then they will invite so many roommates. Like you might be, if it's a 3 bedroom, you have 3 people living together, and they have no relationship whatsoever. So if you see some Somali men living together in one apartment, it doesn't mean they are related. It's very common, or the woman for that matter. So living together itself and saving some money is a big deal. I don't know anybody, I hardly know anybody that lives, especially the young unmarried people. Very few of them live by themselves. They all have roommates. So I just want to share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill?
I think intergenerational living can be beautiful and makes for stronger youth and more resilient kids and more grounded in their identity families in general. My experience too is that it can be a hot mess, and there can be lots of conflict, and it can be crowded, and it can be uncomfortable, and there's independence versus interdependence, and there's all kinds of dynamics that are at play. I think that the key for the families that do it well and are moving toward doing it well is to be able to build on those things, to see this is a messy thing, but something like loyalty, family loyalty, take something that is a value that makes them strong and really build on it as much as you can. If you can find a way to pull out strengths and the positives that are there and the love that maybe sometimes gets buried under conflict, but it's there. If you can find ways to build on that and help them to see that themselves as a strength, I think then it really becomes something that is beautiful. It's still messy, but it's something that can be really meaningful. So.
Thank you. I'd like to invite any member from the audience who has a question to come up to the podium and ask it of the panel. Is there anyone with any thoughts? Oh, sorry.
Hi, I'm Susan Marshall from Catholic Social Services. I run our Senior Companion and Friendly Visiting programs. My question to you, primarily, it is across the board. For the families, either because of circumstance or culturally, that are so, it's ingrained or embedded that they have to take care of their elders, how do people like us who want to help get that information in their hands that you don't have to do this by yourself? They're jumping to answer.
I think it's just seeing where those communities are gathering, what really pulls at their heartstrings and meet them where they are. A lot of folks that are immigrants don't have sometimes the capable resources to get to those programs. So taking that into consideration and what's going to be accessible to them if they don't have the internet, if they don't have those sorts of resources, what are we doing to provide that mailer, what it might be. Yeah.
Thinking about credibility, who can be someone who's trusted, who can help share that story, and access. So things like language. I know in some work I did with peers with NeighborWorks America, one of the things that NeighborWorks around housing stress is to have multilingual resources and the visuals, the storytelling, whether if it's something that's you can present to them in a language that's understood, where stories are shared and people can share honestly how they've been helped, then that can really make a difference.
One of the things we do at the Buckeye Ranch is what's called acculturation and help the people to navigate the systems, education system, healthcare system, the juvenile court system. What we find out, what we learn from the hard way is that there are many resources for the immigrant community, but very few people know about it or tap into those resources. So one of the things that we do is we use the public announcement services, especially if there's a Somali radio or a Spanish radio or a television. We sometimes ask them to do a public announcement for us. Now, another thing you can do, especially for the Somali community and maybe even Ethiopian community and many different, they have festivals and they have, for example, Somali community have a healthy fair once a year. It's sponsored by the Office of the Minority Health of Columbus Public Health. It was May 16 this year. Many agencies get together and each one have a desk and they disseminate information. So what you can do is maybe next year when we have this, the Somali Health Fair, you can come there and have a desk and disseminate as much information as you want. or you can contact some of the Somali-speaking television and radio programs. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for being the first person to ask a question. We appreciate that. Other questions? We have another commissioner from the Community Relations Commission.
Hi, my name is Julia Arbini, and I'm part of the commission. Thank you. You know, one of the challenges that I've had, and I had my mother, who's Colombian. I'm Colombian, born and raised in Colombia, very Latina to my last bone. Don't even carry my husband's name, because my name comes first. Hey. But anyway, one of the challenges that I've had over the years is finding service providers that have the capability, in other words, they have built their own capacity to provide services to limited English proficient patients or clients. To this day, my mom will be 104. I'm sure she would have died many years ago had I had to put her somewhere, and that's something that we don't do. I mean, I was somewhere when I was born, my name was, you know, somewhere said, Julia, you're gonna take care of your family. So I'm the caretaker. So, and that's been my biggest challenge, that, you know, local service providers do not have or have not built their own capacity in order, how do we serve Somali families? How do we serve people from wherever they come from? Because, you know, I'm an agency, I come from the Ohio Hispanic Coalition as well. We have interpreters, and interpreters are a blessing, but it's not all that you need to provide services. So that's my question. What are you doing as an agency to build your own capacity to really come in and know your patient, know your client, and interact effectively with that client, and know what they want if you cannot communicate?
Hiring really does make a difference. So I know like project diversity, boards, and how people hire, there's a lot of work being done on that, but I also think where people worship, where they're at, they need to see leadership that's very diverse, that's interacting and teaching the people the importance of exactly what you're talking about. So even if you want to hire and you're on a board and you support diversity, in other areas of your life, it's not really integrated in fully. And so we need, in these places of power, seats of power, to really look at how people are hired, who's there at the table, how we're welcoming people. And ultimately, that helps get people hired in a variety of positions.
Well, and that's fine, and I don't want to take too much time. But what I like to leave behind as a caretaker, someone that doesn't speak English, is 104. I have ministers come in, I have everybody come in, and very little have ever had anyone that speaks Spanish. So I have to take time, I have always taken the time, even though is their obligation to have someone that speaks the language of the client. So my message to employers is, wake up. When you hire somebody, hire a bilingual person, whether you're gonna need it for this or for that. We function in two worlds.
It's not integrated.
And we haven't learned that message. Oh, I have been told, oh, I don't have that many clients in Spanish, so why would I? Well, you know, I'm bilingual. All my lifetime, I worked for the state of Ohio. I used my language when I had to, but for the most part, I was doing business in the English language. So that's my message. As a caretaker, there's a void there that needs to be kind of plugged in. Thank you very much.
Commissioner.
Can I come on that?
Absolutely.
Thank you for that question. We deal with this every single day. One of the things that we suggested with the Becky Ranch Somali program, outreach program, one of the things we suggest is the most important thing, if you have a large clientele of a different ethnic group or immigrant community, the most important thing you can do is to give a cultural competency workshop of that culture to your employees. That works. Believe you me, it works. I will give you one particular example. We were contacted by one apartment, I'm not going to mention the name, one particular apartment where the 95% of the tenants were Somalis. There was no interpreter available, and there was no one Somali in the staff. So they have serious intercultural communication problems with the community. When they have a flyer or they want to make an announcement, it's only in English. They post the doors, some English flyer, and nobody reads it. So they were frustrated, and they contacted us and said, we have a serious problem with the Somali tenants. Can you help us? So we sat down with them. We say, okay, you wanted the Somalis to understand you. What are you doing to understand them? Do you speak Somali? No. Do they understand your culture? No. Do you understand their culture? No. How do you expect them to understand you when you are not facilitating them, when you're not doing anything on your behalf to understand these people? So one of the things that we offered them was to take a Somali culture workshop for all their employees. And they did. And they came back and said, thank you very much. It was a success. It was, they keep calling us up to today, asking us cultural consultations and advices every day. So what they did was they changed a lot of things. They hired a Somali community liaison, who also are interpreter at the same time. They started interpreting, translating all their documents to Somali. They started, having meetings with the community, and it was a success across the board. So providing interpreters is not enough. You actually have to take the next step and try to learn or learn something about that particular community. Thank you.
I think we had one final question, and then we'll have to wrap to be respectful of people's time.
My name is Georgina Alvarez, and I work with the Ohio Latino Affairs Commission. Hearing you, I came with two questions on how we can do it. One, it's the marketing that you were mentioning, and the other one is values. One thing that I had been in this country for 3 years, and I'm Latin, I'm from Costa Rica, and our values are completely different from the American values. And one thing that I am sure it's going to happen to me is that probably in 10 years or a little bit less, I will go back home. I don't want to be an old person here because I feel the system is very inhuman. But my question is in the marketing side, how, and the value side, because you have now a country, multi-ethnic, multicultural, and old, getting older and older. So what is going to happen when this country becomes more brown, let's say, than white? Because the problem really started with a culture. I do not know how many years ago, but it has happened because even the people that come from the Mediterranean have our same family values. So it looks like probably 80% of the world has family values. But when you come to this country, those family values are changed and tend to disappear. And then when you get older, you better die because you're really bothering me, It's just that message that you get. Or you're getting old, you're going to a nursery home. And that core of values, it's the hard part because it comes from faith-based groups, because when you go to church is when you learn your values. Your values are not taught in school, and they're taught in your house and church. So how the marketing can start changing the message to the people because we need to start sending different messages to the United States. And let's put it, in this case, I don't like to talk about colors, but in this case, it's specifically to the whites that do not have the family values as strong as Somalis, Latins, Africans, Mediterraneans, Arabs. So if you see, and Asians, if you see the high percentage of the world has family values. But when they come here, that changes. And then how we can get, through marketing, I don't see any other place, through marketing and faith-based, but how they think that we can change it, because I just do not know how to express myself. It's just like going back to the original roots of humanity, being human, being loving, being caring. I think so that is probably what I am referring to, how we go back to there.
I hear you talking about the golden rule in many ways, and anybody, if you have a chance to read the book, No More Throwaway People, it's about that too, because in essence, I hear you say that people get thrown away, and
Yes.
how do we create another message that gets lived out?
Thank you. Thank you.
I think something that your question is a good one, and it's, so for instance, this idea that certain cultural groups have family values that are different from the dominant values and beliefs about family in this country is pretty undeniable. I think it's what we've been talking about all day. That is, but first we should remember that there are values around family in the U.S. They are just different from the kinds of values that we talk about. In that the other value that's there and decisions that's made in this country is where family fits in the whole list of things that people value, right? So, and that's also embedded in your question. So I actually don't think that we as a country don't like old people. I don't think that as a country we don't care about old people. It's just that we care about some other things a lot more, right? So in this country, we care a lot about, you're valued by how much money you can make. Well, when you get older, you can make less money. We value people in this country who are strong. And as you get older, or if you're born small like me, you're not going to be strong like that. So you get situated and positioned, right? And people make decisions about how valuable you are. So I think there are values that we attach to, like how much money you make and how strong you are. And we know people. We always ask people, even in the introductions that we do for ourselves, the thing you're known in this country by what you do, what your work defines you. You say, my name is Terrell, I'm a professor. Right? So I tell people, that's not me. I mean, I'm Terrell, native of Virginia Beach. But we value work in this family. And as you get older, especially when you get to be supreme elders, it's less likely that you work. We don't value things that older people value. Things like recreation time. Time to think and enjoy. Enjoying life is not something that we are comfortable admitting as a country that we think is important. And that is what puts us in this incongruence or at odds with certain parts of our population being older folks. I think we had to think about that. And how do we do it? I mean, the media plays a role, but I think we've already talked about it. It's got to be cultural exchange. It's got to start in the family. It's got to start in the workplace, certainly the religious organizations, but also in our own minds.
There's so much to unpack, but I do have to wrap this up. And thank you so much to the panelists. I am sure there was a lot of thoughts and emotions that came up with the last comments. Thank our partner for this series, Columbus State. And thanks to Molina Healthcare for the healthy snacks that they provided, and especially a big round of applause for our panelists and for our audience for being here today. Thank you.